All right, so we've been talking about The Fall by Camus, and we got just a little of the ways into the book on Monday, and now I guess we're into the meat of it. We can probably reveal the sort of Egg McMuffin important moment at the center of the book. Uh, Walter, do you want to talk about the thing that happens?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
mhm.
But I'm far more,
And we should probably backtrack a little bit, but yeah. Mhm.
yeah, I'm far more interested because it's one of my favorite books, and I've read it before. In your impressions now, because to have a newbie reading The Fall to me is like a wonderful opportunity. But briefly, what happens is we've got Jean Baptiste Clemence, John the Baptist, and I guess his last name might mean clemency, the merciful or
Yeah,
something.
except it's with an A.
Yeah,
That's
I
weird.
know. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it certainly in a literary way reminds you of that
Mm.
term. We've got him at a bar, the Mexico City in Amsterdam in the 1950s, former Parisian lawyer, lover of women, champion of the poor and the oppressed, pro bono lawyer for noble causes, but now reduced to a kind of barroom lawyer for like pimps and organized crime people in Amsterdam. And what he's doing is he's telling his life story, or the bit of it that really matters, to an unnamed stranger who might be the reader, might be you or I. And here's how here's how far he's gotten in that story. Like I say, he was a lawyer. He represented all these people who needed one, who couldn't pay. He loved and enjoyed the feelings of virtue and the sort of drug-like hit to the ego that comes of always being the noble, merciful, selfless person. But what he's basically confessing to is, though I appeared to be selfless, and though I took great pleasure in it, and though the world rewarded me for it, I was actually the most selfish, cunning bastard you'll ever meet underneath. And I never had to admit that to myself until something happened. Something that showed me up for the fraud I am. And what was that thing? Well, one night I was walking, probably between mistresses, because he likes to keep lots of love affairs.
He was coming from a mistress.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's just gotten out of bed, and he says his blood was coursing through his body in some very pleasant and invigorating way. And he crosses a bridge on the Seine, the romantic Seine. And it's a beautiful evening, the glow of the sun still in the west. And he sees a woman standing at the edge of the bridge, standing at the wall, dressed in black. He notices her and he walks on. And then moments later, he hears a splash in the water. And he realizes, of course, it's the woman having jumped. And then he hears a cry, and he can kind of hear it dying out as though being carried away down the river. And then it goes silent. And what did he do? He walked on. And what did he do the next day?
He didn't read the papers.
He didn't read the paper because he didn't want to know.
Right.
And he found out that that's who he is. And so fearful is he of the world's judgment of him that he decided to judge himself first. And he has sentenced himself to exile in this bar where he's going to tell people this story. Why? That's the question. What's he getting out of it? But he has revealed the sort of morally troubling incident which exposed himself to himself.
Yeah, he becomes a kind of professional liar, to a liar to himself, right? Already being aware that he's kind of a hypocrite. And there's actually a line in here. Actually, let me find it because it's funny. My emotional impulses always turn toward me. My feelings of pity concern me. It is not true, after all, that I never loved. I conceived at least one great love in my life, of which I was always the object. And I highlighted that line because there was when the term metrosexuality first came out, there was a newspaper article or a magazine article, and I forget who wrote it. But one of the lines was, a metrosexual may be heterosexual or homosexual in orientation, but or bisexual, but his primary loved object is himself, right? And that is who this person is. He is a raging womanizer, but in terms of love, there's only one for him. He's a one woman man, except it's him, and he realizes this vanity is just this gigantic. It's like this Asian sized thing, continental expanse in his personality. But he not until that moment where he decides not to jump in the Seine and try to save this woman does it really stick in his craw. Like he's been able to successfully suppress everything else, but this one he can't.
And remember, this is a book written in the shadow of the Holocaust, right? And it's explicitly referred to earlier in the book. He lives in the Jewish quarter in Amsterdam, and he makes this sort of bitterly edgelord style crack about how our Hitlerian brethren really did a good cleanup job on, the Jews and so on. He's just an edgelord, Hitler, by the way. No one would have ever guessed.
Right.
But his refusal to intervene in the suicide and his not even wanting to find out if it had happened later is obviously a Holocaust reference. How could we ignore this? How could people who did ignore it and know do so? But
sorry, just quickly to interrupt there. He has a really interesting thing about that with regard to Christ, where he talks about even Christ had things on his conscience. Were not others massacred in his name when he was being moved around, when the Romans were chasing after him? There was blood spattered when he took on when he pronounced himself guilty and took on all those sins. He wasn't being completely selfless. Some of that was actually his own sin, right? And this is an interesting point. But I think what he was in a roundabout way trying to say that everybody. It's like the moral version of Milo Minderbinder. Everybody gets a share of being guilty.
Yeah, he's the dark, pessimistic, moral version of Minderbinder. But what? Okay, so you've nailed it. His intention is to convict the whole human race. His intention is to prove. He calls himself a judge penitent over and over. And what he means by that is, I'm guilty. And I've judged myself, but I'm also going to judge the whole human race.
Exactly.
And I'm going to convince you that in this bar full of pimps and prostitutes and gangsters, the reason you read the book line by line, paragraph by paragraph, is for its rich, eloquent, and memorable damning statements about humanity. It is a list of indictments against humanity done so elegantly and so memory. Let me give you a few. He said, the essential, he's talking about slavery and how everybody's against it in principle, especially the past forms of it. But in real life, he says this, the essential thing after all is being able to get angry with someone who has no right to talk back.
Right.
You're against slavery, but you and everyone else ultimately wants the ability to have someone in their life that they can yell at who can't talk back.
And he goes to great lengths to show that everybody does. Even people who have nobody in their life, they get a dog. You know what I mean?
Right. It's a father with his son, or if they don't have a son, they get a dog. The other thing he says, just between us, slavery, preferably with a smile, is inevitable then, but we must not admit it. You know, and he's one of the funniest one-liners is, for modesty, I really took the cake. which reminds me of Mark Twain's famous saying, sincerity, if you can fake that, you've got it made.
Yeah, it's a great epigram, right? And the book is written like that. It's funny that you bring up Twain. Like, one of the things I was going to say about the way this book is written is that it's a succession of sort of gorgeous one-liners of the Twain, Oscar Wilde. I'm trying to think of who else is in that category of people who can create incredible laugh out loud sentences over and over and over again. But it's that in this very highfalutin philosophical argument. So you're reading somebody who's like an awesome wit, and it gets a little distracting for me at times. Like at times, I'm so kind of taken by the eloquence and the mellifluous prose that I take the eye off the ball a little bit, and then I'm beginning to wonder if that's kind of the point. But as you say,
that's an interesting observation.
So there are so many of these things. Like when he's talking about himself, I'd have given 10 conversations with Einstein for an initial rendezvous with a pretty chorus girl. There's just so many things. In any case, my sensuality, to limit myself to it, was so real that even for a 10-minute adventure, I'd have disowned father and mother, even were I to regret it bitterly. It's just over and over again. It's these lines that are really, really funny and memorable. Let's see. Let me find one.
I said on the last broadcast that Neil Strauss, the author of The Game, the pickup artist's Bible.
I was going to say
had told me that Camus, that Jean-Baptiste in The Stranger was really the paragon for the pickup artist. And one thing that Jean-Baptiste says, he basically discloses that his secret with women is indifference. And he said, as a result of not being romantic, I gave romance something to work on. In other words, his basic game with women is to say, I've given up on love. I'm so bitter. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever be swept off my feet again. Challenging.
So you mentioned there is one section one passage in the book that is basically every pickup artist book rolled into one. And here it is. I often change parts, but it was always the same play. For instance, the scene of the incomprehensible attraction, of the, quote, mysterious something, of the, quote, it's unreasonable, I certainly didn't want to be attracted, I was even tired of love, etc., unquote, always worked, though it's one of the oldest in the repertory. There's also the gambit of the mysterious happiness no other woman has ever given you. It may be a blind alley, indeed it surely is, for one cannot protect oneself too much, but it just happens to be unique. Above all, I had perfected a little speech, which was always well received, and which I am sure you will applaud. The essential part of that act lay in the assertion, painful and resigned, that I was nothing, that it was not worth getting involved with me, that my life was elsewhere and not related to everyday happiness, a happiness that maybe I should have preferred to anything, but there you were. It was too late. And so, it's brilliant, right? And it's also true. I think that, there's a book, surely you must be joking, Mr. Feynman. You've ever read that?
Oh yeah, love Richard Feynman.
Yeah, Richard Feynman. So he talks about how he always had trouble meeting women in the book. And as soon as he started being indifferent or difficult, like suddenly his fortunes changed. Like he took advice on that score.
Right. One of his nostrums was never buy him a drink.
Right. Exactly.
Make them buy you a drink.
Right. And this is counterintuitive for a lot of sort of young men.
Right.
We want to be nice, it turns out that doesn't work.
Well, and also women tell you otherwise, but they mislead you.
Right. Right. Yes, exactly. Now we're getting into dangerous territory.
Yeah, let's get back to Camus. Yeah. We can launder all our private sins and, vices through this character.
But this thing, so he's very slick. He's verbally just awesome command, and he knows it, right? He
even in translation, which rarely happens.
I was going to point that out. It's very rare. There are not many writers that translate funny, because part of comedy is timing, and because the timing is naturally going to be off in translation, there are going to be more words, more syllables, whatever. It's not going to be quite right in translation. But he translates as funny in English. It almost makes me want to read the French to see, and learn it a little better. But the fluidity, the eloquence, the mastery of language and argument rhetoric, because remember, this is a lawyer too, right? He could convince courts to set a guilty person free, all these other things. You start to wonder in the middle of this book, as he indulges this question of his guilt, and what the appropriate punishment was, and how he sacrificed, how he sort of sabotaged his own life afterwards. And is he trying to tell me that he suffered enough already? And
is he running the same game that he always ran at another level?
Right. And
didn't he just tell you that what he used to tell women was that I'm nothing, it's all over for me? Isn't that what he's doing? He's seducing someone.
It's a seduction. The book is a seduction, and it's kind of it's like a literary Mobius strip where you're being led down a path. So he's telling you the end of the story at the beginning, but you don't realize that you're part of, you're a character in the same drama. It's just you're at a different end of the loop. But it's the same thing happening all the way through, and it's an amazing gimmick, if you can even call it that. But it's a trap for the reader, and the only thing I can compare it to, and it's kind of a stupid comparison, is there's the movie Starship Troopers, which is a smash bang awesome action film about, foreign Earth is invaded by bugs, and you get worked up about the horror of the cruelty of these gigantic, horrifying insects. What you don't realize is that you're being drawn into like a Hitlerian ideology all the way through, and they gradually start introducing.
But while supposedly watching one be satirized.
Right, exactly. It's supposed to be a satire of that. At the end of the movie, you're cheering somebody who's literally wearing an SS uniform, and they have tricked you into becoming exactly what you're supposed to be laughing at. That was a cruder version of this. Like this is where Camus assumes the very smartest reader. And it's almost like a challenge that he takes upon himself. Let me see if I can bag even the best of the best. Right.
That's right. Let's see if I can seduce people even after confessing that I'm just a seducer.
Exactly. And you do fall for it.
You do fall.
I fell for it.
This is the closing argument of a eloquent and persuasive and charming lawyer. In his indictment and his prosecution of himself as a specimen of the entire human race. And he says things that are so devastating that you would think that, see, what he's playing on is our notion, our myth that self-knowledge equals self-transcendence. You know, that I know my own game. I've seen my own script. I'm sick of my own shit. And that equals having been redeemed or changed into a new person or risen above, you know. But like, and let's remember the French love paradox. The French love paradox the way, you know, the Irish
Russians love
fighting and the Russians love vodka, you know, like logic and its quirks are the French vice. Okay. That and sex. And maybe using the one to get sex would be the full, the full Monty. But he says at one point, I have no friends anymore. I have no more friends. I have nothing but accomplices. To make up for this, their number has increased. They are the whole human race. And what he's trying to get to, he has another statement that I love. He says, you know what charm is? A way of getting the answer yes without having asked any clear question. And he's using our charm, his charm on us and on the feed, to get the answer yes, and without asking the question. But the question that he's hiding is, will you admit that you're just as bad as me? Will you admit that though I might be bad, it's only because I'm bad by virtue of being a human being? We all are. Right. You see, in a strange way, he is, this is an exculpatory novel in which he proves that him ignoring the suicide of this woman, this thing that's still eating at him, actually was something that he should not be judged for, because he is a coward like you are. He's a hypocrite like you are. He is a sensualist who only cares about his next meal and his last roll in the hay. And you can judge me, but you're really judging yourself.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the humility to ask for real absolution or to recognize anybody's stature to judge him.
You're right. That's the question. Will you forgive me?
Right.
And
right.
He's trying to get yes without answering it.
He's trying to get yes without answering it, without asking for it.
Yeah.
And it's funny you brought up in the previous show Notes from the Underground. This is a little bit of the Grand Inquisitor here too, right? I think it's the devil's argument. This whole thing. It's a fiendish, sort of piece of rhetoric that's designed to absolve oneself of guilt and to remove the idea of individual guilt.
Yeah, to dissolve your sin into the concept of original sin, and to dissolve your responsibility into the concept of collective guilt. And like I was saying earlier about the internet, it turns out that no matter who does the shooting, it's the internet that is at fault. Imagine one of these shooters lives to give a monologue like Jean-Baptiste and says, it was terrible of me, but do you not go on the internet? Do you not look at pornography? Do you not pretend to be people you aren't? Do you not say things that you don't mean? Do you not hang out with groups of people that you wouldn't otherwise hang out with? Are you not just as crazy, just as soulless, just as dehumanized? And yet you point your finger at me?
Yeah, and imagine it's not some 21-year-old raggedy kind of lost kid, but Dave Chappelle, right?
Right.
It's like somebody who's able to completely charm you, on every level. that's kind of what's going on with this person. And you know,
or Jake Tapper.
or or Jake Tapper, right?
Yeah, I hid the president's mental breakdown. But don't you hide the fact that you drink too much? Don't you do this? Didn't you cover up and not notice when your girlfriend was cheating on you because you didn't want to believe it? And
aren't you impressed by my rectitude now? And
right. But I realize it, and you don't. And see, I'm punishing myself by being here, not there in Paris in my fine apartment. What are you doing?
Right. Yes. Just one of the last things I wanted to point out is, so as I'm reading this and I'm trying to figure out, like, well, how do I feel about this person? Like, at first, I thought, well, this is just a fascinating story. I'm on for the ride, right? Like, let's go for it. Then, you know, he mentions the moment, and then there's a weird sort of plot device in the book where he just doesn't come back to it for a while. It's a strange thing, because the drama of that thing that happened in the Seine is one of the few. It's one of the few visual scenes that really sticks with you in this book, because the rest of it is a conversation that's happening in a, you know, it's like My Dinner with Andre almost. It's
right.
It's a dialogue, right?
Wow, so, that is a great corollary. It is right? Like My Dinner with Andre.
Yeah, and so you're listening to this rap, but your mind is stuck. There's a fishhook stuck in that scene, and you're saying, "Wait, don't we have to go back to that for a second?" And he keeps going on and on and on. And it was at that moment that I hit this line. In any case, here it is. I have never really been able to believe that human affairs were serious matters. I had no idea where the serious might lie, except that it was not in all this I saw around me, which seemed to me merely an amusing game or tiresome. And so it's this weird confession that this is a person who has no ability to be serious, after confessing to something that he clearly thought was serious, because it's haunting him, you know? And I don't know. I think
his actions are contradicting his words.
It's almost like he bared his soul, I think, a little bit involuntarily in a few moments, you know, in the later stages of the book. And I don't know. I read it as Camus giving you clues as to what's going on, and kind of trying to at least give you a fighting chance against this person, but maybe not. I don't know.
He's also he's forcing the listener to do what he did. He heard this horrible splash in the water, this suicide, and he did nothing. And he just moved along with his life. He didn't even read the papers next day. And he's forcing the listener to hear about this incident and then carry on listening to him not mentioning it. So in other words, he's reproducing in the listener the same suspension of concern that, you know, he is convicting himself. He's implicating, or actually recruiting you into suppressing consciousness of the same thing he suppressed consciousness of.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? As he's telling you that he left that moment behind for a long time and plunged into all this other behavior, he's doing the same to the reader, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, I guess we can wrap this up on Monday. But the one thought I had is that as you go further into the book, I found myself more and more on some unconscious level being repulsed by this person, or reacting in a negative, not by the person, but
You start resisting.
You start resisting it. Yeah. And I think that's supposed to be healthy, a healthy response to this. And, why is that relevant to now? Because, we live in a materialist age where everybody thinks that everything can be diagnosed and identified and categorized. But Walter, you and I grew up reading books that taught us that there is this indefinable something at the middle of all of us that speaks in a certain way and guides us, right? And some people look at that as a religious thing. Other people just say that that's a part of human nature. Whatever it is, I think Camus believes in it, and he's trying to keep us in touch. Or maybe he doesn't, right? Maybe he thinks that after the Holocaust that it's not, whatever that thing isn't strong enough. I don't know.
Well, you sent me a passage that I had never noticed before. And it comes after he says, well, at least he's saying post-Holocaust, post-World War II, post the mass death. Maybe he's also referring to things that went on in Russia implicitly. He's saying, at least the human race doesn't have any illusions about itself anymore. At least we don't have to go back and argue what's right and what's wrong. And what's the passage you sent me? He's like,
said, this is the truth, we say. You can discuss it as much as you want. We aren't interested. But in a few years, there'll be the police who will show you we are right.
Right. He said, we're past the philosophical stage. We're past the reasoning stage. We've seen what monsters we are. And he says, now we're on to a more mature level of civilization in which we say, I don't care if you can prove me wrong. In a few years, the cops are going to arrest you on my behalf and prove me right.
Yeah,
because
it's kind of a chilling, right? Yeah. It's a chilling little piece of the book, and he I think he foresaw that the future was going to be this place that was, it was going to be, the Philip K. Dick version of society, right? I think he saw that coming.
And one last sort of contextual point. Camus is a left-wing French thinker who hung out with the most left-wing French thinkers. But around this time, his worldview was starting to become complicated because he saw in Sartre and other of his colleagues a willingness to start apologizing for mass death if it was for the right reasons. After you had just seen the disaster of someone carrying it out for other reasons, he was starting to hear his colleagues say, yeah, but the problem wasn't all those people being killed. The problem was the reason they were killed. And in the pursuit of this other end, that radical solution is justified. And Camus was suddenly horrified by the company he was keeping and by its willingness to suddenly, just as we've been talking earlier, justify a past behavior based on a new intention. And so he was very dangerous to the left because in this instance, especially, he was saying, are you really so good? Because this is a very liberal man, this narrator. He if you didn't hear his confession, you would think of him as a champion of the people, a champion of the oppressed, AOC or something.
Or Chase Strangio or something like that, Well,
right.
Maybe not him, but yeah.
He's almost a figure that Gavin Newsom almost.
Newsom, yeah.
Slick and everything. But he's telling you that, at the heart of my virtue lies self-regard and narcissism, basically. So this made him controversial. Albert Camus was to die just a few years later, and he was to die in a car crash with his publisher, in a high-speed car crash. And it has been thought and it has been rumored, and evidence, though somewhat dubious to those who really look into it, has been produced that he was assassinated by the Soviet Union.
Wow, I hadn't heard that.
No, believe me, I have Camus mavens in my life, and I've studied him, and it is an open question that keeps being beaten back as to whether he was assassinated by the international communist movement, the Soviets.
It's a Comintern. Yeah.
The Comintern.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And look, either way, like what you're talking about, very similar to Orwell, right? Orwell, famous leftist, but goes through World War II and starts to see things in the British socialist movement that freak him out, right? In terms of apology for Stalin, other things, and he becomes complicated. And but they're very different writers. That's the thing, you know. Orwell builds this kind of conventional horrorscape novel, and this is something different. It's like a cross between the Screw Tape Letters and you know, the Grand Inquisitor and Notes from the Underground. But you know, the prose is gorgeous all the way through. It's an argument, and it's very intellectual, but kind of thrilling to read. Yeah, maybe we on Monday, a way to wrap up with this would be to, well, you know, ask, how does Clemence remind us of the sort of pseudo-intellectuals of today? Because there's a lot of stuff in this book. Like, you know, I flagged probably 20 or 30 different passages that made me think, wow, I could have read that in the Atlantic, you know, or the New Yorker. And he predicts a personality type, or maybe it's a personality type that's always existed. You know, a sort of pseudo-intellectual mover and shaker, who, you know, at his heart is, you know, there's a gaping hole full of just lies in the middle of the person, right? And it's a uniquely modern person, I think, right? You know, this is the kind of person who could only exist in the age of media and law and stuff like that, like
appearances. Yes,
appearances.
You know, if we are to ever have the reconciliation that I think both you and I long for, if there's ever to be a real peace treaty between the different philosophies and movements, you know, now in conflict, both sides will have to do some real self-examination. Now, for the left, this is as deep a self-examination as I can imagine. What its equivalent would be on the right, I'm not quite sure yet, but we'll find it, because I think it does exist, I'm sure.
Yeah, there maybe Celine or somebody like that. Maybe we should look for whatever that book is.
He might have been unrepentant, but
he might have been unrepentant. Yeah. Either way, if you haven't gotten all the way into this book, it's definitely keep going. You know, I don't think there were any slow moments in it, but if you did find any, just keep fighting through. Like, the prose pays off, and the gadget in this thing is so sophisticated and so interesting that I think it's worth it. You know, more than worth it at the end. So, anyway, thanks everybody for hanging out. This has been an eventful week, and this is a great book to be reading during this time. It really forces you to flex your muscles. So, thanks, Walter, for recommending it, and have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you.